Welcome to Globespan. I'm Paul Nehru, Tennessee of Guyana. Once more, we are here with a very eminent group of Guyanese to discuss a very important issue, the Constitution of Guyana, a specific article, Article 13. What would we like to discuss today? We would like to know whether this article has been ignored since it has been inserted into the Constitution, or whether it has been implemented. And today we have with us Mr. Collin Haynes, who is a health expert. Collin is a very dynamic young man, and he's here to share his views. He always keeps telling me about the Constitution, so we look forward to hearing his views on it. And we have with us Mr. Lincoln Lewis, an old friend of mine from the 80s, fighting for free and fair elections, and an old Labour leader brother. Lincoln played a very important role in the Caribbean as the secretary of the Caribbean Congress of Labour while I was General Secretary of the Caribbean Workers' Council. We belong to two Labour internationals. Both inside and outside of Guyana, we have always been involved in fighting for the workers and for the underdogs. So we are very happy to have him today with us as he heads the Trade Union Congress in Guyana. And we have with us our eminent senior counsel, Timothy Jonas, who is the chair of ANUG and probably a future presidential candidate in the next elections in Guyana. So gentlemen, welcome. Floyd Haynes, my co-host, is currently not here, but he will join us about 7:30. So we look forward to welcoming him and to listen to his views also. So I will begin with our attorney at law because he, I am sure, has a lot of knowledge about the Constitution and about Article 13. So first of all, let's chat a bit about so that people could understand it in simple language. What really is Article 13? What does it tell us? Timothy?
Well, yeah, you started with me. Good evening, Paul. Good evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Nice to be on your show.
Our show.
Because you started with me, I think that it might be fair to everybody to read it, if you will permit me the luxury of that bit of time. I'm not going to read it verbatim, but I'm going to give a brief, a shortened version.
We have it.
The main objective of the political system of the state is to establish an inclusionary democracy by providing increasing opportunities for participation of citizens and their organizations in the management and decision-making processes of the state, with particular emphasis on those areas of decision-making that directly affect their well-being. So, a nice soundbite is given there, a nice theme that we should have inclusionary democracy so that people have a say in decision making, especially where it directly affects their well-being. Sounds very nice. I think that we have to look at how constitutions evolved, written constitutions. Started back in the 1700s with the various revolutions, American Revolution, French Revolution, and the new democracies that sprang up established written ground rules that they call constitutions, which were supposed to reflect morals that were universal, that everybody felt an affinity for. Right to life, right to liberty, right to justice, those nice sounding things. What happened in the 1900s, especially with the advent of the fall of colonialism and a whole new crop of new countries coming up, is what they call the modern constitution. Now, I am not a supporter of what they call the modern constitution, because the modern constitution is full of legalese. It's got hundreds of articles. It tries to be comprehensive and all-encompassing. But what happens is it becomes unreadable. So that very few people, and I include lawyers and judges in that, can take the trouble to sit down to read that tome that we treat as a constitution that we adopted in 1980. One of the criticisms I have of the Constitution is that a lot of the clauses, and I include this clause 13 in it, are feel-good clauses. They're sound bites, but they don't have any real bite. You see, if you have a right to liberty, there should be a corresponding clause that says if somebody takes away your liberty, this is the punishment or this is your compensation. But if you don't have a corresponding clause to say, well, if someone does not establish a system of inclusionary democracy, this will be the punishment or this will be the result, then all you've got is something that sounds nice, looks good on paper, everybody can talk about, but it's toothless. It has no kick in it. And that's what Article 13 is right now. It is a feel-good statement that tries to give a tone. Let us all hold hands and sing Kumbaya and have an inclusionary system of democracy. And hard experience in Guyana tells us that we have never seen a system of inclusionary democracy. The system is designed to perpetuate two parties that hold each other up by keeping the people polarized. So we need a system of inclusionary democracy, but it would be a mistake to pretend that Article 13 takes us in that direction.
Okay. We have a young member of the younger generation. Collin, what is your take on Article 13?
Hello, Paul, and it's a privilege to be here today among familiar faces and faces that I've seen, like luminaries like Senior Counsel Jonas and Lincoln Lewis. So I love constitutions, and Paul, we've been having this discussion because I believe that the heart and the soul of a nation is its constitution. It's a living document. It's subjected to changes. But when a constitution is formed, the founders have a focus. They have a mindset. And usually as the visionaries of the country, they're willing to take this mindset somewhere, right? Whether we're talking about creating social and economical development or addressing some pressing issues in governance. Now, Article 13 talks to inclusive governance. It talks to inclusivity of Guyana, right? Now, what I want to focus on primarily in it is the fact that it talks about increasing opportunities for participating citizens. It means that at the top of governance, we must include the people, the citizens. Because in any functioning democracy, we all know it's for the people, by the people. The people are the smallest units of inclusionary democracy. But we also know that people are part of associations. And so the article goes on to say that they are going to be part of organizations, and there are organizations that are part of it. Right? So it now takes it to a larger span, right? That now just not only including those that are a citizen in the smallest unit, but now when people come together, they have ideas. I believe that inclusionary democracy in Guyana is not only constitutional, but it has to be a reality. And I think what Timothy is saying is we have to move towards that perspective. So the people want to be able to see these changes to occur. They want to be able to see things are improving, but we cannot have inclusionary democracy that is just rubber stamped. So what we're doing is currently we have a system that practices conclusive democracy. So I conclude that I only want to invite Paul and Floyd and Timothy and Lincoln to this meeting so that I only get a certain outcome, right? And so we've already begun with the end, and that's not where we need to be. We have to include everyone from the smallest child to the oldest person, from the organization that picks up stones on the side of the road to the organization that drives major policy. This is what I believe is the center and forms the center of this article. One that looks at the smallest unit to the largest unit, and one that has to be sort of a calling for everyone, but it should not be rubber stamped inclusionary.
Okay. Lincoln, recently Dr. Yog, who's well known in Guyana, founded, it was in the newspapers, he founded Article 13 NGO. I had a long conversation with him on the phone about it, and then I subsequently saw you wrote an extensive article saying, well, you're happy somebody now is talking about this because you've been a voice in the wilderness for many years speaking about it, and you wrote an extensive article about it. So can you tell us a bit about that article you wrote and your views on Article 13? Lincoln? Lincoln, you have to
Mr. Lewis, your mic is still muted.
Yeah, you're muted. You're muted.
Just click the button on the bottom of the screen to unmute your mic.
Muted. You're muted, Lincoln. You're muted.
Give him one moment.
Yeah. Yeah, apparently Lincoln is having some difficulties. We may have to get back to him. Now, I didn't want to jumpstart him because I thought we would have gone progressively and it would have been interesting to hear his view, but he has some technical problems. So let's move forward. In Guyana, this word inclusionary has become on everybody's lips, everybody's talking about it. What is the meaning of inclusion in reality in Guyana? What does it mean when it's translated into daily lives of citizens in the context of Guyana? And I am of the view that this constitution, which was the origin of it, was in a referendum which was fraudulent in 1978, and the two, if you want to call them the fathers of this constitution, the two persons who were given the authority to write it was Desmond Hoyts and Shahabuddin. And Shahabuddin was the one who promoted it, spoke on it in Parliament.
Sorry, Mr. Lewis, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. I am here.
We are having some difficulties with the noise on your.
There's a lot of background noise, Mr. Lewis, coming from your end.
I don't know where it's coming from, but I'm alone here.
Kevin, you have any advice to give him? Okay, so the noise is off. So we were saying, I was saying that these two men were the ones who were given the responsibility to write this constitution, and it was done by given the response by Forbes Burnham, who was then a president who was got his presidency based on fraudulent elections. And the very referendum, I could remember they put it up as, if you vote for it, it's the house, if you vote against it, you're a mouse. And there's a lot of documentation that the referendum was fraudulent. But more important than that, the referendum was the legislative system, because there was a parliament that was dominated by the PNC, then the ruling party.
Hello. Tell those people on the program, man.
I got cut off. Did you all get cut off? Is
No.
anybody hearing me?
I'm hearing.
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, well, I had gotten totally cut off. I had to come back in, and I don't know what's happening. Anyhow, we have had this difficulty with the beginning of the program. Let's hope we don't have future problems with it. Now, what I was saying is that one of the criticisms of this constitution from the very beginning, from the very inception, was that this constitution entrenched and enshrined, entrenched, and institutionalized something called party paramountcy. That is the rule of the party that is in power, and because of this, it undermines an article like Article 30. So it seems to me that apart from the point that Timothy raised about this thing being a bit of rhetoric and sound bites, because you have an article, but it does not have any follow-up of what the consequences would be if it's not applied, or if there is an independent institution that exists within the that is provided for within the Constitution to say that a citizen who does not feel that they have been included can resort to that institution or that mechanism in order to trigger either an investigation, a hearing, and consequences. This does not exist, and I agree with Timothy 100% on that. What I want to know is that if this constitution in its entirety continues to be the constitution of Guyana, can you really have an Article 4 that will become a reality? Or the problem is with the very constitution itself that we have to recall. So this is always has been one of my concerns. Timothy, what do you think about that?
Well, you gave a lot of background there, Paul, but I'm not sure that the background led to the conclusion that you seem to be aiming at. The method by which this constitution was promoted is a fair criticism. We had a
Collin, you there?
Oh.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Sorry, you hearing me, Paul?
Now we are hearing you. You froze for a while. I don't know if the problem is in Guyana or in New York. Go ahead, Timothy.
Okay, well, I was saying that the background that you gave is a fair description of events, but I don't think that you can rely on that background for say the criticism of the Constitution.
Collin, it seems to me that only you and I are communicating. The two folks in Guyana have some problems. Could it be that the system in Guyana is a problem?
Yeah, maybe it's internet connection. But I'd like to make a comment.
Yeah, go ahead.
I believe that constitutions are existing, and they're, like I said, when the founders frame a constitution, it's usually in the context of what was happening back then and what they foresee will happen in the future. However, like I've always said, constitutions are up to amending, and certainly back, if you look at some older democracies, they've took a great deal of remodeling, retooling. Like in the American Constitution, we had the 18th Amendment for slavery. When slavery was once legal, now it's no longer legal, and things like that. I want to touch briefly on the fact that what you said, Paul, about public citizens don't have a recourse. They do have a recourse. I mean, if you look at 2015, 2020 rather, the last election, citizens of Guyana have a right that if there is a case or there is something that they don't like, let's say the government is bringing a road through their neighborhood and they don't like that road, they can go to the courts. They can make an injunction. And we've seen in the last election how many times there were injunctions that were brought before the courts to stop specific things. Now, I am not saying that these actions that they did for any particular reason what's right or wrong. But I like to say that the citizens of Guyana have a choice. And I think what we need to be talking about mostly is how do we empower that choice? How do we educate them on that choice, right? Because a lot of the average, I think our Guyanese people, we are not quite adept to the Constitution and the provisions of the Constitution. And I think whether we're talking about churches or schools or in social clubs or social settings, we need to empower that. We need them to know that if there is something that you don't like, something that the government is doing, and like we said, as part of it is talking about the individual and their organizations can take that up, can move towards a recourse. I don't think the Constitution is devoid of citizens' participation. I think what the discussion that we need to be having is how to empower them to do so and how to be able to put those in authority so that they're putting their feet to the fire to do so.
Okay. Timothy, you got, we had some technical problem. Timothy, we had some technical problems and you were making the point that even though I provided the background to the issue of the Constitution, it didn't correspond to my conclusion or whatever comments I made. So can you continue because we had an interruption?
Sure. I like what I heard Collin say. I'd like to get back to it, but to finish the thought that the line that I was going down with you, you made the suggestion, Paul, that the Constitution supports party paramountcy.
Yes.
I don't see that, and I would really like to see the article that you can point to that makes a suggestion that there is some kind of party paramountcy that is supported in the Constitution. Our system of government is not unusual. There are a number of seats in Parliament, and you vote, and depending on the number of votes a party gets, that party gets a proportionate number of seats. So there's nothing in the Constitution per se to restrict the number of parties or their eligibility to hold themselves out to vote and that kind of thing. Where systems are created actually to try to exclude new parties and new participation is really in the legislation that Parliament passes dealing with the step-by-step machinery, holding elections. So the hoops that a new party has to jump through to be eligible, to get signatures on a list and to do this and to do that. It is designed to make life difficult. The two established parties can do it easily. So there is paramountcy in terms of a system designed at legislative, not constitutional level, to perpetuate the two parties and to try to exclude anyone else. But the Constitution itself, although its origin stems from fraud, stems from rigging, stems from illegality, the Constitution itself is not an unfair or abhorrent document. There is nothing in it that you can point to say this is manifestly dictatorial, manifestly bad. Most of the problems our country has had is by the failure of our officials to adhere to the constitutional provisions, to break the laws. They break the laws. And that is not a criticism of the laws. That has to be a criticism of the officers. Now, I would like to, I like the approach that Collin took in terms of trying to advocate for people power. But there are a couple of reservations that I have about what he said. He made the suggestion that during the course of the last election, the fact that there was so much litigation and so many claimants brought is evidence of the accessibility to the courts by your ordinary citizen. I don't think that's accurate. each of those cases brought, starting from the one that named as claimant Dandalal's driver, who subsequently committed suicide, down to the last one, Jones. The named litigants were nominees suing on behalf of the large political parties. So I don't think they could be treated as examples of people power. They were tokens. They are token names brought in order to further the large party policy, the large party intention. And I don't like that as an example of a demonstration of people power. In fact, to me, it's just the opposite. It's a demonstration of the use of the courts by the large parties pretending that it's something else. In fact, after the elections, you will remember the news came up that a lot of those so-called private actions were funded out of the Attorney General's chambers. And those fancy foreign lawyers were paid straight from the coffers of the state, our taxes. That's not people power. That's something very different. The reality is that it is difficult for a private citizen to try to establish a constitutional right against the institution. It's difficult if he has money, and most people don't have money. But you will find that many large established businessmen are actually afraid to challenge the status quo because they're aware that the largest contracting party in Guyana is the government. And if they push against the government, they lose those contracts that they're angling for. So there are all kinds of push and pull factors at play. And the reality is that the person on the ground is powerless. And it's hard to change that. And it's even more hard to change that if we have that two-party system. We need inclusive democracy, but we have to stop just relying on blind labels like inclusive democracy and deconstruct that concept and identify the nuts and bolts of what systems we want, which define and achieve and accomplish inclusive democracy. That is an abstract that is much too wide for us to pretend we can just talk about it in a soundbite. We have to identify a system that we advocate for. This system is a form of inclusive democracy. That system is a form of inclusive democracy. And we have failed to do that. It's not something we like to do. We don't do it easily.
Lincoln, we are sorry that you had some difficulties. Can you share your views now? I had mentioned when I was speaking that you wrote an extensive article in the newspaper about Article 13, and you said for some time you've been a voice in the wilderness, and you were very lonely, and you're happy that people are paying attention to it now. So can you come on now?
Mr. Lewis, you just have to unmute. There, yeah, press it one more time. You had it just now. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So let me say thanks for inviting me and say good night to the comrades who were there. So let me point out to you very clear that Article 13 came post 1997 election. Article 13. Before that, this Constitution speaks about consultation. Article 13 came after the Janet Jagan fiasco. And there you start to talk about inclusionary democracy, which speaks to the issue of involvement in the decision-making processes of the state on issues that impact one's well-being. It is something totally different from the what was in the 1918 Constitution. What we have now, let me give you an example. Article 149C speaks to the role of the trade union in society. There are two institutions in that this Constitution. Outside of it, you have two institutions. One is the trade union, other is the cooperative. We have a situation in this country where there are issues that impact the well-being of workers who are represented by trade unions. And the same people who are elected to office refuse to talk with the trade union. 155 of the, Convention 155 of the ILO speaks about collective bargaining in the public service. We have ratified that convention. And while we have ratified that convention, what we continue to do,
We have a government that decides that they're not going to talk with the trade union. And because they can't decide that they're not going to talk with the trade union, the supporters of the government and even the members of parliament will do one thing, is to support what the government does in breach of the convention and in breach of the laws of this land. The issue, if you're talking about making Article 13, if you making Article 13,
Lincoln has some
even
problems.
without,
There.
I said, if you're there, are you getting
Yes, we are here now, but you've been cutting off on and off. But continue. You
Yeah.
must-
I'm saying that if you decide that you're going to make Article 13 real, let me preface this by saying, Constitution is not written for judges and lawyers only. It is written for the ordinary man to understand. Because you have to operate within the confines. Every citizen has to operate within the confines of this Constitution. The problem that we have is that when political parties are in opposition, they speak to the issue of making Article 13 real. But when people go into government, they lack the will to do anything that can bring realization to Article 13. And that is our problem. 77 of the Constitution speaks to that a region shall prepare its economic plan and shall be funded by the government. The government, you know what they did? When the regions prepare the plan, you know what they did? They move and they decide what they're going to give to the region, what they're going to fund, right? We have to get off of that. So when we're talking about Article 13, there are avenues there to do things consistent with Article 13. But politicians, I believe it's Timothy made a point about the two major parties. It is not the two major parties. It is politicians, most of the politicians who have worked before, who have come in the system. They do it, they don't want it. People believe that they can just sit in Georgetown after they're elected and determine what happened in Linden and give instructions. Determine what happened at Anai and determine what happened at Lethem. The people at Lethem will not be given an opportunity to determine what they would like to have. And Article 13 do not speak to that. It is question here of the spirit and intent of the people. A constitution is dead at its heart unless it's activated by people. Unless we do that, unless we understand that you can write what you want to write, you can do a law you want to do, unless these guys are prepared to do something, you're not going to get it done. And what we have to do, this is where it happens. Let me give a simple example. Give you a simple example. The cash grant. The cash grant is determined by a few people. If it is for flooding, a group people say who must get it. And not question whether you're entitled to it or not. Right? unless you're entitled to it or not. We don't have that. We don't have that. We have to stop that type of behavior. Right? Look, a couple of days ago, about the teachers were on the road protesting. And the government did every damn thing to make sure that they get nothing that they asked for. But sugar workers went out 1 or 2 days and they give them everything that they asked for. Article 13, if Article 13 or systems are put in place or programs are put in place, development put in place, these type of things will be minimized. This type of behavior. So when you talk about inclusionary democracy, it is about the people and their organization not participating, but involved in the decision making on issues that impact their well-being. For the trade unions, this government decides that who they will speak with and who they will not speak with. That's our problem.
Okay,
because we are entrenched in two respects. Our politics with party support, and we are also entrenched about how you look by race, and if possible, what religion you have. So this issue, I am encouraged that another group wants to work to make Article 13 a reality. So it can be done. One of the ways it can be done is by putting programs in place where people and their representatives are involved, and those programs are being funded by central government. That central government sitting down and determine what happens at Black Bush Boulder or what happened at Linden. If the people at Linden say we want X, and you will say, I will not give you that, I'll give you something else.
Okay, Lincoln, we got a very good grasp. You're extremely passionate on the issue. I'm very encouraged that you are alive and kicking with all the fire. I knew you back in the 80s, and like a good labor leader, you are a great advocate of your position. Very clearly, what you are saying is that we have a problem with the personalities, the individuals who are in politics. They somehow have some defects. And also you're speaking about our shortcomings or limitations or distortions in what their role is as politicians. You also made a very important point about a critique of the political parties themselves and the way they function and the way they relate when they're in opposition, when they get into power. You also mentioned the trade unions, and you're saying that there's a division there where particular unions are not being spoken to, consulted. So these are very interesting points. I'd like to welcome Floyd Haynes, who has just joined us. It is very clear that this Article 13 that speaks about inclusion, I could recall when Forbes Burnham first became the Prime Minister of Guyana in 1964, going into 65, that he started something called consultative democracy. And he invited a lot of people from various sectors of the society to come and see him at the Prime Minister's office to talk. Consultative democracy. Now we are talking about inclusive democracy. We used to talk about verifiable, free and fair elections, which was supposed to have been the fundamental basis for us to move to this inclusionary one. Now, the elephant in the room, as Floyd likes to say it, and he once said at a forum here in Washington, is the race issue. And there's no doubt that when we speak of inclusive democracy today, we are faced with a big dilemma, and the dilemma is that the grass stops, whether they be in religion or politics, or whether they are in civil society, are very polarized. And there are a lot of people who are not talking to a lot of people. We have an official opposition with an opposition office that is paid with the funds of the state, a leader of the opposition, but there is no communication between the president or the leader of the House and also the opposition leader. And there is an issue there. Then there has been over a number of months in the public media that people of African origin in Guyana have been clamoring that they believe that the current government is a hegemonically Indian government and that they are not making any space for Afro-Guyanese, even though Afro-Guyanese represent half of the votes which were given in the last election because it's only a one-seat difference. These are real issues and we can't avoid them. So I would like to move the discussion now of Article 13 to some of the controversies and the accusations and counter-accusations in the context of race in Guyana. How can we use Article 13 and of course include what Jonas said? You can't have an article that doesn't have consequences. You can't have an article to which people don't have some mechanism to resort to redress their concern, and so on and so forth. So how do we deal with this right now as the country is polarized? How do we go beyond it? Because time is running out on Guyanese as this polarization has what we call a cost-benefit analysis. You could make a cost-benefit analysis. It's millions of dollars. It's pushing out Guyanese into migration, all kind of issues. You could write a whole doctoral thesis on it. So I'd like to hear your views on that. Floyd, you just came in, but you are aware we are discussing Article 13. You've heard Lincoln's views. What is your take on the Article 13 and how do you view in the context of Guyana today we could use this article of inclusion to overcome some of the challenges the society faces right now?
Okay, okay. Thanks, Paul, and thanks to all the other guests. Been listening to Lincoln, and I couldn't find any area of disagreement with what he said. I think Article 13 is something that is absolutely necessary. But the real question, I sort of line up more with Tim on this. How do we, now that we've identified a problem and we believe it is necessary to move the country forward, how do we operationalize that? How do we get Article 13 implemented rather than being ignored? And so I would like to focus more on the solution and listen to what Tim and others would have to say. But that's more important to me than the problem itself. How do we, if there are no consequences, and by the way, Article 13 isn't new, it didn't just happen. It's been around for a long time. And the real question is, why hasn't it been implemented to date? And going forward, what is it that we can do as citizens to ensure that it's not ignored?
I wanna make a comment about this. Particularly, I want to also revisit Mr. Jonas' earliest comment about when I referenced about the ability for citizens within this inclusive democracy we have to bring cases. Now, I was just using the election as an example, but it still remains to be established. Can a regular citizen of Guyana, if they, for some reason, elections, healthcare, science and technology, education, they're not in agreement with something that the government, opposition, or their leaders propose, can they bring a case? And I would want to say, if that's yes, then this amendment works, because what it does, it places the onus on the people to do so. And as Floyd is saying, now we're discussing both the context of race and how it aligns with that. I want to I want to say, and also with Mr. Lewis's point, how do we make this work? So I think that we have within us the tools to make it happen. We have to realize that elections are the beginning of our advocacy. Elections are just the initial point where we say that this is the direction we want our country to go in. Whatever the issues are that matters to us, elections are the beginning of them. Now we have to continue doing advocacy. We have to, if there's something that we're not agreeing with, that both government or opposition, like I said, we have to hold their feet to the fire. We have to gather, whether it's in small groups or small circles to large circles, and get out there.
Collin, hold your thought there. We have to go on a break now, and when we come back, we will take up what you're saying. We'll take up what Floyd is saying and the others. Is Article 13 ignored, or is it being implemented? It seems from all four of you, it has been ignored. So what we'd like to talk about is concretely now, how can Guyanese stop this ignoring and make sure that it's being implemented? What has to be done in this regard? So let's go for a break and return.
Get your meals delivered directly to your home. Order your curry, duck curry, goat, or chicken, plus your dalpuri roti and busupshut from allfromonesupplier.com. We ship your meals directly to your home, so you can enjoy it upon arrival or refrigerate it and take it out when you're ready to eat. No more waiting in lines and no more losing time. Now you can treat yourself with a tasty curry and roti. You can also order solos, ices, pear jacks, coconut water, and much more from allfromonesupplier.com. It is free shipping to all U.S. states on all your curry, duck curry, goat, and chicken, plus sodas and all West Indian items. So treat yourself or send a gift box of your favorite food, tasty pastries, sweets, and coconut water, or any West Indian item, products such as fish, meat, curry powders, pepper sauces, and much more from allfromonesupplier.com. Call today at 718-551-3292 or visit allfromonesupplier.com. Remember, it's free shipping throughout the U.S. Thank you to all of our Travelspan and Amros Travels customers and staff. We are still operating after COVID shutdown thanks to all of your support. Our staff has made the best efforts during COVID to speak with the airlines on your behalf. They stayed on hold for hours sometimes with the airlines to rebook your reservations. We are happy to serve. Our offices are operating at 10809 Liberty Avenue, Richmond Hill, New York, and our Val Park office and GT offices are open as well. Travelspan survived these 27 years with our customers, staff support, and God. In our 27 years, we are grateful to be here with you in the community. So call us today in New York at 718-845-0437. In Trinidad, call 645-1604. And in Georgetown, call 227-1701. And Rose Hall, call 337-4287. Globespan 24/7 continues. Dave West Indian Products is the only distributor of 100% authentic West Indian products. Dave West Indian supplies fish, vegetables, curry, spices, sodas, and coconut water, plus geese, and much more straight from Guyana and the Caribbean. For all your shopping needs, visit Dave's Guyana Fish and Grocery Market. Dave West Indian products are also available in West Indian stores, Key Food, and allfromonesupplier.com. Dave West Indian has a full line of the most desirable products to fit all your needs. So visit Dave Guyana Fish and Grocery Market on 118th Street on Liberty Avenue, or in Maryland at 7505 New Hampshire Ave, or any West Indian stores or allfromonesupplier.com. Dave West Indian, your 100% authentic West Indian product.
Welcome back to Globespan. We are here discussing whether Article 13 of the Guyana Constitution has been ignored over the years or whether it has been implemented. Our guests over the last half an hour have found consensus that the Constitution has been ignored with respect to Article 13 in terms of its application. And now we want to focus for the remaining of the program on concrete recommendations on how the citizens of Guyana can ensure that Article 13 can be implemented. Do we sit and wait for the government to do it, and then after the next election we say they didn't, or there is something that the citizens can do? So our guests will now focus a bit on that. Timothy, what do you think? How can how the citizens of Guyana can ensure that this article is implemented and with the consequences that you said that has to go with it? If not.
We're making a big assumption here, Paul. We're assuming that the citizens want inclusionary democracy. I've had occasion on this same program to make very specific recommendations, suggestions as to the nuts and bolts step-by-step process by which there could be inclusion. And I was quite taken aback at the vitriol of comments from both. Well, this program is mainly watched by proponents of the PPP. There are other programs who are mainly watched by proponents of APNU. But both of them say the same thing. And let me tell you what they say. Half of them will say, we can't share power with someone who has 19 fraud charges against him. That's out of the question. And the other side will say, we can't share power with someone who tried to rig an election. That's out of the question. So every suggestion that you might make for this nice sounding inclusionary democracy, for how to implement it, must necessarily mean that the government of the day must relinquish some of its monopolistic power to give it to the other side, to say we're sharing with you. But any relinquishment of that dictatorial power that our democratically elected government has will be opposed, and there is no appetite, there's no motivation, there's no thrust to encourage the government of the day to release its power, to share its power. So that between 2015 and 2020, the APNU supporters were quite happy to say, why should we share with those people? And now in 2020, the PPP supporters are quite happy to say, why should we share with those people? So the five of us sitting here are happily assuming in the comfort of our respective rooms that this concept of sharing democracy is something that will be universally accepted. But as Lincoln correctly said, the only time that any of the political parties look at it or talk about it or advocate for it is when they're in opposition. The same constitution that you just pointed out was imposed on us by fraudulent means was not changed by Chedi Jagan in 1992 and was not changed by his successor in 1997. And in fact was only changed in early 2000s when there was rioting on the road. And those changes were so laughable, so meaningless, as to be stamps, patches that made absolutely no change, no difference at all. The party, when it enjoys power, has no reason to relinquish its power, which is the necessary corollary for a discussion of a shared democracy. Its supporters do not want it, and it will not gain any support from the other side by doing it. So where's the motivation? And it boils down to the fact that in Guyana, we have two ethnic-based parties that thrive and are maintained and sustained by that same polarization, which has at the other extreme of the vicious spectrum that we don't need to share power with you. And that is where we are.
I think, Jonas, that there is another aspect to what you have said. I don't dispute what you have just said. One would have thought that if political parties are falling down, that non-governmental organizations, civil society organizations would take up the baton and would struggle for these things. But then NGOs in Guyana, I'm not saying all of them, but a significant number of them got caught in the trap of not being independent of both political parties. I ideally would like to see there is a role there for them, a very important role, and we have a multiple organizations, NGOs. If they could have a consistent record of being separated from both political parties or political parties and act as real civil society, we'll have some kind of balance. I also believe that we should advocate, whoever is there, that local government should have a real role, because we have a situation in Guyana where this was exposed with the recent flood. The recent flood hit the people at the local level really bad. And if you look at what happened at local government, you would see that they did not have the resources or the training of the people in local government over their own lives. And so this is why we felt that that impact of that crisis so much. So I'd like to also ask, what is the role of non-governmental organization? Because if the political leadership have consistently, since political independence, have pursued policies of exclusion, alternately, depending when they're in political office, then where do we look in a society? If not, we'll be on the road to Haiti. We will be on the road to Haiti. So I'd like to hear your views on that. Do you believe there is a role for non-governmental organizations, and would one of the fundamental criterion be that they be independent of all political parties? What do you think, Floyd or Lincoln or?
Let me just take this up. You say you're looking for practical issues that can bring about this whole issue about inclusion and democracy. Let me say to you, let me give an example of something like that. And I believe you alluded to it earlier, or you did not go in depth with it. We have a leader of our opposition that is paid by people in the country. He has an office. We have a president that is paid by people. The Constitution speaks about what the role should be. Well, you have a president. Venezuela, they are in conflict, the opposition and the government, over a number of years. And they decided that they are going to sit down in Mexico and they are going to agree that the issue of the border with Venezuela and Guyana, that they are going to unite on that issue as two political forces, government and opposition. Rather than our president call Armand and say, look here, we need to talk how we going to deal with this border issue. How we are going to mobilize this country in defense of its sovereignty. He criticizes what Venezuela is doing and goes around the place to complain that this political, those people are nationals of their country. It tells you how myopic the political leadership of this country is. This is where issues of this nature says where we can start to unite our people.
So Floyd, right? You have a response to Lincoln?
Well, I think, I mean, again, I always try not to start the race in the middle. And, when I look at these problems have existed for quite some time. And as long as we only become sensitive to the problem when we're on the outside, we're never going to be able to solve it. If you have an issue-based campaign, or you're an issue-based group, you will identify an issue and you will fight for that issue regardless of who is in power. But that typically isn't what happens. And so these things have been going on for quite some time. There is no constructive engagement right now by the opposition with the government, or vice versa. The opposition, I've always said, and I get a lot of flack for this, but the opposition has more to lose by not engaging, it seems like to me. And they represent a large section of the Guyanese people. And right now, that group is not getting fair representation. And so I believe there has to be constructive engagement. I don't want to get into who must talk to who first or any of those types of things. I prefer to frame it differently. You have to do whatever is necessary to provide the people that put you there the representation they deserve. And right now that is lacking. That is sorely lacking. And these problems did not just creep up yesterday or a year ago or 2 years ago. They've been around for quite some time. And we have to move beyond making these things a larger than life issue when the other guy is doing it versus when our guys are doing it. And that's kind of my view of the thing. I think to move, listen, the 1 minute manager says if you have a problem and you don't have a solution, what you have is a complaint. And too often we have complaints and we don't identify solutions. I prefer to spend more time coming up with solutions. How do we solve? I asked this question in a previous broadcast. How do we solve the intransigence, the standoff?
So how do we do it? How do we?
Well, I think there has to be an outreach and an acceptance. Personally, this is my personal opinion. If I were the leader of the opposition, I would reach out to the government and engage the government, and then I would back it up with a list of demands, and I would make those demands public. But you cannot. Sherwood Lowe wrote an article a week or so ago, and I thought it was a pretty good article. He basically says if you don't engage, you're giving the other side a pass, and I tend to agree with that.
Let me just make the point, Floyd. I read that article. What is absent from that article? It is the reality of it. The current president says that the only way he will engage, he sets the condition that the only way he's engaged, that Harman needs to come out and publicly say to this nation that he is the legally elected president. In fact, that is essence what he's saying. Tell me why Harman has to put, these are children, these are big men behaving like children. Why Harman needs to come out to do that? You are there in the presidential office. You are paid as president. You are acting as president. Harman is paid as leader of the opposition. Two big men get on and do the work. Don't waste our time. And that is what we need to say. This is childish behavior from this guy.
Lincoln, we got your point, and it seems to me that the participants in this program are saying that we have a problem of leadership. It's virtually a crisis in leadership. What I am listening to you all, I'm gathering also, is that there is no faith that the ordinary citizens can engage in lobbying for Article 13 to be implemented, because somehow they are polarized ethnically and they are on board with when one group is in and the other group is out, they are on board with exclusion. This is saying that we don't have leadership from below, so we have a vacuum there. And if we look at the middlemen, who are supposed to be the non-governmental organization like Lincoln, I want to say to you that one of the criticisms of NGOs, which a trade union is a main part of it, is that you all are too aligned with political parties and you're not sufficiently distant and independent. So if we don't get leadership from below, because of the ethnic polarization, we don't get leadership above because of ethnic polarization, and in the middle, the intermediaries or the middlemen are also polarized, we are on the road to Haiti. So it seems to me the major conundrum here is leadership at all levels of the society. Because if you go to the religious organization, you find they are aligned. If they're not aligned because they're getting money for their church or some kind of benefit, they are aligned because of ethnicity or whatever other reason. So the society is in big trouble. And I keep saying this. You could have all the oil money in the world and you could pour it into Guyana. It's not going to move Guyana from being the third poorest country into a developing country of significance. So I'd like us to address that. Leadership. And Floyd, I know that you are researching currently this issue of leadership. Collin, what's your view on this? Is it leadership across, horizontally and vertically in the society that is in crisis?
So 3 things. First of all, I believe that if you're going to roll out an intervention in Guyana of any kind, I've always said that in my experiences working in Guyana for international organizations, it has to be 10 different ways, right? What are the uniqueness we fail to understand in context of problems of Guyana is you have 10 totally different regions, 10 totally different makeups, 10 totally different social, political, and economic orientations, right? And so what we see happening is when there's a lack of inclusiveness, someone in Region 8, for example, is not brought to the table, right? And you only have 1, 3, 5, and 10 or 4 in there, then 8 feels slighted. And sometimes what might even happen, 8 might not even know that they've been slighted until somebody tells them. So we have this problem, and I want to come around to Lincoln's point, where we have to realize what the end game is. What is this for? Why Article 13 actually exists? It exists for inclusion of ideas, which can be complex, but at the same time, complexity of ideas lend to emergence. So there is the classical boardroom where people are disagreeing, but what happens from then emerges great ideas. We may not have to like each other. We don't have to be in total agreement with each other over everything, but we could accept difference. We could accept it in the context that it represents a group of people that have a stakeholder. Now, talking about the current impasse we have when it comes to opposition and the government, I think somebody has to grow up. I think someone has to think. And look, what pains me the most is who's at stake of losing. I recall looking at a program with former Prime Minister Hamilton Green, and he said you have 30% making decision, or 40% rather, making decision for 100% of Guyana. But if you had 90%, which is inclusionary democracy, which is what Article 13 is saying, which means that when you bring this 90%, we are not going to agree on the contracts and how we're going to distribute the wealth or whatever the case may be. But you know what? 90%, I believe, is going to be able to fight giants like ExxonMobil or whatever companies that come along the way. Now, I also want to sound my call to institutionalization. I think one of the things that we find in Guyana is there is this cultural and there's a cultural deficiency, and it doesn't promote institutionalization. And when I say institutionalization, I mean we need to understand that all the problems that we're looking at are institutions that have a right, whether it's nonprofit, government, or civil society organizations, is to be able to look it through the lens that education and training are are a core composite, that whatever we say or do must be driven by data, because the data doesn't lie, the research doesn't lie. The research says how, when, where, and why. And number three, we have to be able to deliver this content in a way that is satisfactory to everyone, so that when you visit a ministry, or when you visit a government institution, or when you visit a nonprofit organization in Guyana, that you don't feel like, you're there to serve them, rather they're there to serve you. So I feel like we have to look at institutionalization. We also have to look at changing our culture. I think we have a very laid back culture in Guyana, that everybody just goes along with the time of the day. And what that does, it allows political parties to continue their agenda. It allows for what's happening right now. You have an impasse on both sides and nobody's speaking. But naturally, what my personal view is, if I was the president of Guyana, I would realize that I'm the president of all of Guyana. And what I need to do is reach out to people who represent all of Guyana. And that includes the opposition, that includes Tim's party, that includes Lennox's party, it includes all the parties. Because at the end of the day, you've taken an oath, right? The president of Guyana has taken an oath, a solemn oath, to defend the Constitution. Whether you like it or not, whether you think that the Constitution wasn't in context of what you like, whatever, you probably shouldn't run for president if you think that. But you've taken an oath in front of the Chief Justice and to the whole world that you are going to solemnly defend and promote this document.
You made your point. What do the others think about? Yeah, go ahead, Lincoln.
Let me just make this point. You may not be aware. In December of 2018, after the no confidence motion, this TUC wrote a document that we passed to the private sector and a number of NGOs. And you know what we said in that document? We talk about activating Article 13, how we can benefit. It's an ample opportunity where both the government, the party in government and the party in opposition, they are at war. Let us start here now. Let us insert ourselves into it. You know what happened? By February, the whole issue of Article 13 and inclusionary democracy was thrown out by the same people. And all that they were talking about is we must have who is illegal and who must have elections, and rather than seeking that opportunity to put systems in place.
Yeah, but Lincoln, I know that debate and that discussion about the...
No, you don't know it. You don't know
it. The point is, Lincoln, what do we concretely recommend to get out of this conundrum?
I
was hoping that you would give some kind of answer to this.
I am saying to this program,
yeah.
I'm saying on this program, we can talk what we want to talk unless the people who have control of the consolidated fund and the laws of the National Assembly decide to talk. We don't get anywhere about it. What we may want, as a people, we may want something else. And what we may have to do is to put boots on the ground. And we got to march against them. We have to come with a program. Let me don't play games with this matter. I am not blaming one side. I am saying to you that we lack the will to deal with this matter. And the time has come when we got to do that.
And that's one recommendation, that people have to march to end this polarization and to pressure for the implementation of Article 13. The question is, if the people are ethnically polarized, the question is, as Jonas pointed out, the question if we have a vacuum of leadership from below, we have a vacuum of leadership, we have a problem of leadership with the NGOs, and we have a problem of polarization at the political level. What is the way out? How are you going to get people wrong?
That's an opinion. That's an opinion that we have a vacuum of leadership. We have leaders. But you may have more leaders in the informal system than the formal system, right? There are leaders here, right?
Leaders,
but
but
what has
Lincoln,
happened?
What
Let me
about
just
the
make the
others? Let
point,
the
Paul.
others think about it.
Paul, I hear you.
Lincoln, give
I
the
hear-
others a chance to respond to you. You're making good.
No, let me. All right, good. But let me
Give
make
the
this
others a
point to you.
chance to respond. Jonas, what's your response to Lincoln's reflection just now on his position?
Well, Paul, out of deference to Lincoln, I don't want to interrupt him. I'd like him to finish and then let me answer. I don't want to interrupt the gentleman.
Okay, well, we got a problem of time. We only got a couple of minutes left for the program. So, Lincoln, can you say in one sentence, one final thing so that we could get some response? Lincoln?
Let me make the point that at the end of the day, the issue is not only about meeting each other, but we must end up with a program of development that people are comfortable and we plan at the end of time to implement that. That's what we need to do.
Okay.
This is not about us warring between or among.
You've made a concrete recommendation. So, Jonas, what's your response to Lincoln and his reflections? Your system, Jonas. Yeah.
Good. We have a problem in Guyana, and Floyd is right and I disagree with Lincoln. We have a problem with leadership, and with the best of intentions, our most sincere and well-intentioned leaders are demonstrating that they don't understand what is needed in terms of identifying problems and finding solutions for those problems. I've listened to everyone on this show, and you, Paul, have been very clear. Okay, we've all said we need inclusionary democracy. I'm reserved on that because I believe most of Guyana just want to see the people that look like them in power. There's a minority that I think is enough for a swing vote that doesn't feel that way, but let us go with the ideal of inclusionary democracy. How do you achieve it? And I'm going to give you some examples of what was said today. Lincoln said, put systems in place. Collin Haynes said, consult, outreach, and acceptance. Hold feet to the fire. Lincoln said, mobilize country in defense of sovereignty. Collin said, fix institutions, change culture. The president should be president of all of Guyana, should reach out to all of Guyana. Now, that is some of the most, and I'm going to be blunt, I'm not a good politician, vague, airy-fairy, pie in the sky kind of comment that you can hope for. If you want to talk about nuts and bolts of how to achieve an objective, don't use such vague language that doesn't take us forward. You want a solution. So explain what system exists, what failure you see in the system, and how you can fix that by a step-by-step process. And that is a policy, that is a plan. But when I listen to these generic and general concepts, program of development, that was Lincoln's expression, I might as well say, man, let's eradicate poverty. And then we can end the show because we've solved the world's problems. We need a step-by-step program understanding what the rules are. A New and United Guyana said over and over that the way to do that is to achieve an opposition majority in Parliament so that the complaint that Lincoln made, which is that it's only when you're in opposition that you want inclusion, well, then when you're in opposition, you have the power, because you control Parliament, to implement that inclusionary democracy. So that is step one. We need a minority government and a majority-controlled Parliament. Hopefully we can achieve that by the small number of swing voters in Guyana being sufficient to break the deadlock of the ethnically aligned voter. Second, we need to implement legislation using the opposition control of Parliament which mandates control by the opposition of the government institutions like GPL, like the Petroleum Committee, like the Energy Agency that hands out petroleum import licenses to friends. If we have both sides involved in those groups, like Guy Oil, like Guywa, then we have an inclusionary democracy, a step-by-step plan to achieve what you're talking about. But as long as we think that we are achieving something by these pie-in-the-sky vague concepts, we will achieve nothing, and we've spent an hour and a half wasting time.
I must say that you are
Paul, can I make
Yeah, go ahead, Floyd, go ahead.
So listen, I think Tim is absolutely right. And I'll disagree with Lincoln a little here. I think we have leaders, but not leadership. And there is a difference, but the show doesn't allow time to get into that. But let me just say this, and I'll take a lot of heat for this. Listen, Dr. Ali is the president of Guyana. He is at the UN right now. He is traveling as the president. The world sees him as the president. I believe unequivocally that it's in the interests of the opposition and the people they represent to recognize Dr. Ali and initiate dialogue, because I think not doing that, it hurts the people that the opposition represents more. And it is on that ground that I would suggest that the opposition should reach out, recognize the president, and work towards some kind of rapprochement.
Well,
and I think we play this game of optics, and you know, I wouldn't talk to him, he doesn't talk to me. I'm not a kid, I'm not gonna call. These are all optics, and it's political grandstanding while the people are suffering. And if you truly care about the people, if you truly represent the people, you would do whatever is necessary to get your seat at the table so that you can advocate for the benefit of the people that you purport to represent. And it isn't.
Can I make a point?
We have only a few minutes for Lincoln. You have to be very.
Let me just make this.
Yeah.
Let me make this point very clearly.
Yeah.
You see, we are making some fundamental errors. Inclusionary democracy is about the people's ideas. It's not about mine. I will talk about a system, or the leaders will work out a system of how these things can be done. But the idea is to realize inclusionary democracy has to come from the people. You've got to go there and do that. And this is where you understand me, I walk a different road, because this is about people and people's involved. The other issue, there's nowhere in the Constitution which says that the opposition got recognized the president. GCOM made a pronouncement, and because GCOM made a pronouncement, that pronouncement, unless it's overturned by the court of this land, that is what it is.
Okay, Lincoln.
And the president, by way of constitution, the president is entitled to talk with the man.
Lincoln, we
don't say you don't talk with anybody.
Of what
no man. I have been, Paul. I have been in this business a long time. You don't close the door to negotiation. You don't close the door to dialogue.
Okay, Lincoln, we have your point, and I'm running out of time. So in the program, I think you had a wonderful opportunity to articulate very fully your very strong views. And we have heard you, and the people on the program have heard you. Now I'm going to give Collin just 1 minute. Collin, just tell me what's your overall reaction as a young man from the new generation or the millennials. I don't know. You look young to me.
Yeah, I'm more a millennial, yeah.
Go ahead. Let me hear in a very brief way, what's your response to everything? And then
I think inclusive governance is like having 10 invitations. And you're giving these 10 invitations out to 10 people. And you're saying that I'm not going to discriminate who I agree on. So if I don't agree with this person, I'm not giving him an invitation, or the other. If I don't agree with Floyd, I'm not going to invite him to my wedding. Or if I don't agree with Tim or Lincoln or Paul, I'm not going to do that. Now, I want to say that we have to start somewhere. But oftentimes, Tim, we saw that we had a minority government and we had a majority parliament.
You have to wind up a bit.
And that didn't happen.
Huh?
You have to give a final thing on it. Because we are
I'm getting some background noise as well, so I'm trying to from the thing. So I'm trying to make my point.
Yeah,
Now,
can you conclude, please?
I want to say this.
We don't have time. It's a question of time. Come on.
Sure. Martin Luther King said this, that the arc of the moral universe is long, and it bends towards justice. He took Theodore Parker's assumption. Now, I think that sometimes that arc is being linked in all the time because of people, because of inclusive governance. But that's my take on this.
Okay, but I want to make a point here as we conclude the program that it seems to me that we have a conundrum here of who talks to whom. And I want to give a personal example because in 1984, up to 1985, I opposed very strongly both the PNC and the PPP. And in the United States, 5 Guyanese were caught purchasing guns in Ohio, and they were arrested by the FBI and the RCMP. In the Mirror newspaper, an article was published that gun runners are on $1 million bail. Tennessee, guns are coming for Tennessee and his outfit. In spite of that, after the 85 elections, I wrote a document to the WPA and the PPP asking them to fight for us to have a united front to fight for free and fair elections. My thing is that if I could have done that and the PCD made an important contribution, why is it the leaders in the country right now? Because I put free and fair election and the country's interest at heart. I didn't worry that I got kidnapped because of that headline for 5 days and 5 nights blindfolded and interrogated and I need vengeance. So I'm going to conclude this program by just reading a very interesting article that I've circulated among my friends on Facebook. And I think the leader of our, we have a great difficulty in the global south with leadership. But recently, the Germans choose Merkel to guide them, and she led 80 million people for 18 years with skill, with dedication and sincerity. She didn't show up on the streets of Berlin to be taken. She named the Lady of the World, which was described as the equivalent of 6 million men. In those 18 years of power, no transgressions were recorded in our country. She did not appoint any of the relatives to a state post. She didn't claim to be a glory maker. She didn't get millions of pay. Nobody was happy for her performance. She didn't get paper and promises. She didn't fight those before her. She didn't fight those before her. This is very important. Merkel leaves the leadership position of the party and transits it to her heirs. Germany and the German people are in the best conditions. The reaction of the Germans was unprecedented in the history of the country. The whole population came out on the balconies and from their homes and clapped spontaneously for 6 consecutive minutes. Stormy standing ovation across the country. Germany said goodbye to its leader, the physicist and quantum chemist, who was not tempted by fashion or lights and did not buy real estate, cars, yachts, and private jets, knowing it was coming from all these Germany. She leaves her post after leaving Germany at the top. She leaves her loved ones, claim no benefits. 18 years, she never changed her wardrobe. When asked by a journalist, she said, "We noticed that you wear the same suit. Don't you have another?" She replied, "I'm a civil servant, not a model." In each of these programs, I'll find a leader in the world who has set an example for leadership. And I will close with this program and say this, that this has been a very interesting conversation, but it does reflect again what is happening in Guyana. We are polarized and we cannot even focus real concrete solutions on how we will implement Article 30 of the Constitution. It's a challenge for us, and we have to take it on. So I hope, though, however, my hope is that somehow NGOs will become independent of political parties and provide some kind of independent leadership. I hope that the leadership in the political parties will reflect more deeply on what is facing the people in the grassroots and that the country is really in trouble. I don't know if they are wearing blinders, but Guyana is not in a very good situation. And talking about oil and oil money is not going to solve the problem. So I close this program by thanking you, gentlemen, for participating. And I look forward to us having a conversation again 3 Wednesdays from now. For Globespan, I'm Paul Nehru, Tennessee of Guyana.